there, thank you so much again for joining me on this channel. As always, I'm very grateful for all your previous views, likes, subscriptions and shares. It is great to be back. I'm so sorry I've been away for the past few weeks. Time ran away with me, then I wasn't feeling very well, and well, it's just nice to be back here once more. Thought it might be fun to look at the Indiana Jones franchise and some of the religious themes that crop up in those movies. And yes, I know I'm wearing a Star Wars t-shirt, but I realise I don't actually own an Indiana Jones t-shirt, which is kind of sad really. But on another level, maybe it is okay to be wearing a Star Wars t-shirt, because the thing about the Indiana Jones franchise, it's the fusion of those two great minds of cinema, Steven Spielberg and George Lucas. The first movie was actually called Raiders of the Lost Ark. Indiana Jones's name wasn't in the title. Released in 1981. Lucas wanted to recreate those early 1930s serial action flicks that you would get at the cinema. They were filmed very, very quickly, and each week you would go and watch your new installment. Remember, this is before people had access to television. And the idea is that every week it would end on a dramatic cliffhanger, and then you go the next week to find out what happened. And that's kind of the spirit of Raiders of the Lost Ark. If you don't know, Harrison Ford plays Indiana Jones. He's an archaeologist, lecturer at university, and he goes and basically takes treasures from around the world and takes them to a museum, where apparently that's where they belong. In his first cinematic outing, he is after what's known as the Lost Ark. Now, the Ark is described in the Jewish holy book, the Tanakh, as the container that the Ten Commandments were kept. The Ten Commandments were a list of rules and laws given to the Jewish people after they fled Egypt. They were given to Moses, their leader, when he was at the top of Mount Sinai. He was also told by God to build a box, a container to keep them safely in. This is the Ark of the Covenant. And the Ark was carried by the Jews as they walked around the desert. It was symbolic that God was with them. The movie is shot at a relentless pace. Effectively, it's a chase. Indiana Jones is trying to get hold of the Ark before the Nazis do, who want to use it for their own evil purposes. So, bit of a spoiler alert. Of course, the Ark is found. And what's really interesting is that when they created the Ark for the movie, of course, they went to the original holy text to use as a guide for building the prop that was used in the movie. The ending of the movie is quite interesting. The Nazis do have the Ark of the Covenant and start to open it up. Not surprisingly, it doesn't end particularly well for them. The notion that no one could look at the contents of the Ark is actually based on something that God said to Moses. If God was to appear in all his glory, then it would simply be too much for any single individual to deal with. And that's kind of interesting, because if you think about it, God appeared to Moses in a burning bush. He appeared to the Israelites as they walk around the desert as a pillar of fire at night and a pillar of dust in the daytime. The end of the movie has the Ark being opened and, well, the chaos ensues. It's the power of God that's been unleashed, and those who look upon it, well, they don't make it. Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, note his name is in the title, came out in 1984, and it's a prequel set in India. In many ways, quite a dark and grim film. Both Lucas and Spielberg admitted that at the time they were going through some changes in their relationships at home, and that's reflected, I think, in the script and tone of the movie. What it does have is an extraordinary opening sequence. There's actually a musical, and Spielberg has often had this long-held desire to direct a musical. Of course, he's done that now with his version in 2021 of West Side Story. Don't just think either that little Easter eggs in movies is something that belong to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. If you watch very carefully, the club that this movie opens with is called Club Obi-Wan, a little nod there to the Star Wars franchise. Indiana Jones finds himself in India, and there's a village that worships Shiva. Shiva is a Hindu goddess. Shiva is part of the Trimurti, made up of Brahma, Vishnu and Shiva. Brahma is the creator, Vishnu is the preserver, and Shiva is the destroyer. These three deities essentially represent life, don't they? The creation of life, life being sustained, and then the end of it. In the movie, this village is finding itself in very difficult times. It's had its Shiva stones taken from it. This is known as a lingam, sometimes called a linga or a Shiva linga. Linga translates as sign. It's a sign pointing towards Shiva. So these stones do actually exist in some shape or form, and they were used to help guide worshippers in their puja, worship. Indiana Jones needs to find these stones, and it leads him to an underground cult who have stolen the stones and are involved in such practices as human sacrifice. This is where the film has not aged well at all, because actually the way that the cult are portrayed is that they worship a goddess called Kali, and the way that they go about it is of course not particularly pleasant. And there are some who say, well look, this is a dangerous stereotype of the Hindu faith. It's really important to underscore that Kali is worshipped today. She is seen as someone who destroys evil. She can be seen as the mother of all living things, the divine mother, and indeed the mother of the universe. Also, as this divine protector, she can also bestow moksha, that is release or liberation from samsara and reincarnation, where Hindus hope that their Atman will eventually end up. In 1989, we have Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. This time, he brings his dad along, played by Sean Connery. So what is the Holy Grail? Well, it has its roots in Arthurian legends and his King Arthur with his knights around the Round Table. The Holy Grail has had various incarnations as a cup, a dish, or some kind of sacred stone. The Holy Grail is believed to bring about eternal life to whoever possesses it. The Holy Grail has also entered our everyday language. It normally refers to an elusive goal, something that everyone would like to achieve but is forever out of reach. In the movie, the Holy Grail is the cup that Christ used at the Last Supper. This is when he told his disciples that the bread would represent his body and the wine would represent his blood. Many Christians will still mark that through a ritual known as the Eucharist or Mass. So, like Arthurian knights, Indiana Jones and his dad go and look for the Holy Grail. There's even a moment where they're on motorcycles and there is Indiana Jones like a jousting knight holding a flagpole. The theme, by the way, was actually filmed at Skywalker Ranch, owned by George Lucas. Yet again, Indiana Jones has got to beat the Nazis to the Holy Grail, and of course he does eventually find it. And of course he has a choice to make, and it is the most simplest and humblest of cups, the cup of a carpenter. He chose wisely. In 2008, we had Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, a slightly different flavour to the movies this time round because it's not actually rooted in a religious tradition. Instead, Indiana Jones needs to find out about the history of an object known as a crystal skull. Now, there are such things as crystal skulls. If you go to the British Museum today, you will see one in its collection. And here's a photograph of it, not one of mine, but one from the British Museum itself. First of all, there are a ton of crystal skulls out there, knocked out for tourists in places such as Brazil, China, and Germany. Tons of them can be located quite easily. I'm sure you can buy some on eBay. This one fell into the hands of the British Museum in the 1890s. The British Museum reckons there's probably about a dozen or so in private collections, all thought to have originated from South and Central America. Some say they are remnants of a lost civilization from Central or South America. Some say they're evidence of Atlantis. Others say they were actually skulls of extraterrestrials who visited the planet. And that's the theme that the crystal skull takes. Actually, the crystal skulls, according to the movie, belong to interdimensional beings, aliens, and they themselves are archaeologists. They are collecting what they can find on planet Earth. They themselves study all the different cultures on the planet and are ready to take them back home. It's an interesting little twist that comes full circle. Indiana Jones meets his intergalactic namesakes. So this leaves us with 2023, where the new movie, directed by James Mangold, a very fine director, and we will see Indiana Jones once more donning the fedora and getting into all sorts of scrapes, no doubt. What the theme will be, I don't know, but like you, I'm very much looking forward to it. As always, thank you so much for watching. I'm very, very grateful for the time that you've given to this channel. Please do take care of yourselves. And as always, if you're able to, like, comment and subscribe. Enjoy your learning.